Yes, Colonel Storey?
Would Your Honors want to proceed now before the recess?
Oh, perhaps we'd better adjourn now for 10 minutes.
Yes. The tribunal, please. The remainder of the presentation during the week will be concerning the criminal organizations. The first to be presented now is the Leadership Corps, including some of the illustrative crimes against the churches, against the Jews, against the trade unions, and the operation of the Einsatzstab Rosenberg concerning the looting of our treasures. On the threshold of presenting the proof establishing the criminality of the Leadership Corps of the Nazi Party, it is in point to restate the prosecution's theory of this phase of the case. It is this: the Nazi Party was the central core of the common plan or conspiracy alleged in count 1 of the indictment, a conspiracy which contemplated and embraced the commission of crimes against the peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity as denounced by the Charter. The Leadership Corps, upon the evidence, was responsible for planning, directing, and supervising the criminal measures carried into execution by the Nazi Party in furtherance of the conspiracy. More than this, as will be shown, the members of the Leadership Corps themselves actively participated in the commission of illegal measures in aid of the conspiracy. In the light of the evidence to be offered to this tribunal, the Leadership Corps may be fairly described as the brain, the backbone, and the directing arms of the Nazi Party. Its responsibilities are more massive and comprehensive than those of the army of followers it led and directed in the assault against the peace-loving peoples of the world. Accordingly, upon the record made in this case, and now to be enlarged upon, the prosecution requests this tribunal to declare that the Leadership Corps of the Nazi Party is a criminal group or organization in accordance with Article 9 of the Charter. At this time, I should like to submit to the tribunal the document book supporting the brief as U.S. Exhibit V. The honors, please, diverting from the manuscript. During the recess, there were placed upon your bench the document book, which has each document marked by tab and each quoted portion embraced by red pencil marks for the assistance of your honors. In addition, we have passed 2 documents that have already been introduced in evidence, an enlarged copy of this chart, more detailed, which your honors have before you, and another chart in photostatic form with reference to the Leadership Corps, and both of those will be identified later. I now proceed to present the proof relating to the composition, the function, and responsibilities and powers of the Leadership Corps of the Nazi Party. First, what was the Leadership Corps? Yes.
Yes?
Rechtsanwalt Servatius für die Organisation der politischen Leiter. Mir ist nach der letzten Sitzung ein Statement von Justice Jackson zugegangen, in dem Vorschläge über die Erhebung des Beweises und die Zeit der Diskussion von bestimmten Fragen, die auftreten werden, gemacht werden. Ich kann die Tragweite dieser Vorschläge nicht übersehen, muss mir daher vorbehalten, entgegen diesem Vorschlag doch bei gegebener Zeit auf diese Punkte zu sprechen zu kommen, falls es nötig wird.
Of course, Council will have the opportunity of making a full argument in answer to the argument presented on behalf of the prosecution. What I understood from Mr. Justice Jackson on Friday was that he proposed that the evidence on the question of criminal organizations should be presented first and the argument presented afterwards. Counsel for the organizations will, as I stated this morning, have the opportunity of calling evidence in answer to the evidence for the prosecution, and will also have the opportunity of making whatever argument they think right in answer to the evidence and argument presented on behalf of the prosecution.
First, what was the leadership corps of the Nazi Party? What persons made up its membership? What was its size and scope? In considering the composition and organizational structure of the leadership corps, it will be convenient for the tribunal to refer to document 2903 PS, which is this exhibit on the wall and which was introduced by Mr. Albrecht at the opening of the trial. And supplementing the chart on the wall, I now offer in evidence document 2833 PS, U.S. Exhibit number 22, which is a chart of the leadership corps of the Nazi Party, appearing at page 9 of a magazine published by the Chief Education Force of the Nazi Party entitled The Face of the Party. And it's this little photostatic copy that you have, and later on we expect to put the big one on the wall. These charts and the evidence to follow show that the leadership corps constituted the sum total of the officials of the Nazi Party. It included the Führer at the top, the Reichslighter on the horizontal line, the Reich office holders immediately below, the 5 categories of leaders who were area commanders, called the Hoheitsträger, or bearers of sovereignty. They are in the red lettered or red line boxes at the bottom. They range all the way from the 40-odd Gauleiter in charge of large districts down through the intermediate political leaders of the Reichslighter, the Ortsgruppenleiter, the Zellenleiter, and finally to the Blockleiter, who was charged with looking after 40 to 60 households, and what may be best described as staff officers attached to each of the 5 levels of the Hoheitsträger. Organized upon a hierarchical basis, forming a pyramidal structure, as appears from the chart which your honors hold in your hand, the principal political leaders on a scale of descending authority were the Führer at the top, the Reichslighter, as I've mentioned, and the main office and office holders. The Gauleiter, who was the district leader, with his staff officers, the Reichslighter, who was the county leader and staff officers, the Ortsgruppenleiter, local chapter leaders and staff officers, and the Zellenleiter, who was the cell leader and his staff officers, and then finally the Blockleiter with his staff officers. I now refer to document, or rather offer it in evidence, document 1893 PS. That's USA Exhibit number 323. And this, if your honors please, is the organization book of the NSDAP, the National Socialist Party. It was edited by the defendant, Reich organization leader of the NSDAP, the late defendant, Dr. Robert Lai, and it's the 1943 edition. A large part of the evidence to be offered relating to the composition of the leadership corps of the Nazi Party will be drawn from this primer of the Nazi organization. And I shall later quote from it, and without so requesting the tribunal each time to take judicial notice, I shall assume, in the absence of question, that it is so understood. And that's document 1893, the English translation that we'll refer to. I now proceed to offer evidence as to the makeup and powers of the Reichsleitung of the leadership corps, which consisted of the Reichsleader or Reichsleiter of the Nazi Party. And they are shown on that long horizontal list at the top of the chart. The Hauptamter, main offices, and the Amter are office holders. The Reichsleiter of the party were, next to Hitler, the highest office holders in the party hierarchy. All of the Reichsleiter and the main office and office holders within the Reichsleitung were appointed by Hitler and directly responsible to him. I quote from the first paragraph of page 4, document 1893 PS. You'll find it on the left-hand side tab. It's the first paragraph of page 4 of that document. I think you'll find it embraced in red pencil mark. Quote, the Fuhrer appoints the following political directors, Reichsleiter and all political directors, to include the directors of the women's leagues within the Reich Directorate or Reichsleitung. End of quotation. The significant fact to be grasped is that through the Reichsleitung, perfect coordination of the party and state machinery was guaranteed.
Page 4, 1893.
Did your honors find it? Document 1893.
Yes, I've got it. Go on.
The party manual puts it this way, and I quote from the 4th sentence of the 3rd paragraph of page 20 of that document. You'll find the page numbered at the bottom, page 20. It's a very short quotation. And may I say, while you're finding it, you'll find a little different translation in there to what I read from my script. I quote, in the Reichsleitung, the arteries of the organization of the German people and of the German state merge, unquote. As I say, if your honors please, there's a little different translation in that portion in your book, the difference in translators.
Top one. You have it.
To prove...
Well,
it is in the right directorate.
Yes, sir.
it's the second one.
Yes,
It begins, it is in the Reich Directorate, where the strings of the organization of the German people and the state meet,
Yes, sir.
Is that it?
It uses the strings there, yes, sir.
Yeah, I see.
This translation says the arteries of the organization and the German people and German state merge.
Mm-hmm.
To prove that the Reichslighter of the Leadership Corps included the most powerful coalition of political overlords in Nazi Germany, it is necessary only to put in evidence their names. The list of Reichslighter now to be offered into evidence will include the following defendants now on trial before this tribunal: Rosenberg, von Schirach, Frick, Bormann, Hans Frank, and the late defendant Robert Lye. The evidence to be introduced will show that the defendant Rosenberg was the leader of an organization named for him, the Einsatzstab Rosenberg. It's not shown on this chart, if Your Honor please, which carried out a vast program of looting and plunder of art treasures throughout occupied Europe. The evidence will further show that, as representative of the Führer for the supervision of Nazi ideology and schooling, Rosenberg participated in an aggressive campaign to undermine the Christian churches and to supersede Christianity by a German national church founded upon a combination of irrationality, pseudo-scientific theories, mysticism, and the discredited cult of the racial state. It will further be shown that the late defendant Lye, acting as the agent of Hitler and the Leadership Corps, directed the Nazi assault upon the independent labor unions of Germany, and that before destroying himself, he first destroyed the bastion of Republican society, a free and independent labor movement, replacing it by a Nazi organization, the German Labor Front, or the DAF, and employed this organization as a means of exploiting the German labor force in the interest of the conspiracy and to instill Nazi ideology among the ranks of the German workers. It will be shown that the defendant Frick participated in the enactment of many laws which were designed to promote the conspiracy in its several phases. The defendant Frick shares responsibility for the grave injury done to the officials of the Leadership Corps by the officials of the Leadership Corps to the concept of the rule of law by virtue of his efforts to give color of law and formal legality to a large volume of Nazi legislation which was violative of the rights of humanity, such as Nazi discriminatory legislation designed to degrade, stigmatize, and eliminate the Jewish people of Germany and German-occupied Europe. Though the defendant Bormann is physically absent from the dock, the evidence as to his responsibility in directing and furthering the course of the Nazi conspiracy is here and expands with the record in this case. As chief of the party chancellery right under Hitler, the defendant Bormann was an extremely important force in directing the activities of the Leadership Corps. As will be shown, a decree of January 16, 1942 provided that the participation of the party in all important legislation, governmental appointments, and promotions had to be undertaken exclusively by Bormann. He took part in the preparation of all laws and decrees issued by the Reich authorities and gave his assent to those of the subordinate governments. I now refer to document 2473, PS, USA Exhibit 324. And you will find the English translation to contain a list of the Reichslighter of the NSDAP set forth on page 170 of this book, and it was edited by the defendant, the late defendant and Reichslighter for party organization, Robert Lye. The following 15 Reichslighter were in office in 1943, and I quote from pages 1 and 2 of document 2473 PS, which reads as follows. The tribunal, please, I don't believe I'll read all of them, but call attention only to certain of them. There were 15. They're shown on the board, most of them. Martin Bormann, chief of the party chancery. And then we skip over to Wilhelm Frick, leader of the National Socialist faction in the Reichstag, shown on the big chart over to the second box from the end on the right. Joseph Goebbels, Reich propaganda leader of the NSDAP, shown also on the same level. Heinrich Himmler, Reich leader of the SS, the deputy of the NSDAP for all questions of Germandom. Robert Lye, Reich organization leader of the NSDAP and leader of the German Labor Front. Victor Lutze, chief of staff of the SA. Alfred Rosenberg, representative of the Führer for the supervision of all mental and ideological training and education of the NSDAP. Von Schirach, Reich leader for the education of the youth of the National Socialist Party. And then finally, Franz Schwarz as Reich treasurer of the National Socialist Party. The principal functions of the Reichslighter, which we might call directors, included the responsibility of carrying out the tasks and missions assigned to them by the Führer or by the chief of the party chancery, the defendant Martin Bormann. The Reichslighter were further charged with ensuring that party policies were being executed in all the subordinate areas of the Reich. They were also responsible for ensuring a continual flow of new leadership into the party. With respect to the function and responsibilities of the Reichslighter, I now quote from page 20 of document 1893 PS. 1893 PS, page 20. I quote. You'll find the number at the bottom of the page 20, 1893. The NS... Did you find it, Jonathan? Quote, the NSDAP represents the political conception, the political conscience, and the political will of the German nation. Political conception, political conscience, and political will are embodied in the person of the Führer. Based on his directives and in accordance with the program of the NSDAP, the organs of the Reich Directorate directionally determine the political aims of the German people. It is in the Reich Directorate, or Reichsleiter, that the arteries of the organization of the German people and state merge. It is the task of the separate organs of the Reich Directorate to maintain as close a contact as possible with the life of the nation through their sub-offices in the Gau. The structure of the Reich Directorate is thus that the channel from the lowest party office upwards shows the most minute weaknesses and changes in the mood of the people. Another essential task of the Reich Directorate is to assure a good selection of leaders. It is the duty of the Reich Directorate to see that there is leadership in all phases of life, a leadership which is firmly tied to National Socialist ideology and which promotes its dissemination with all of its energy. It is the supreme task of the Reich organization leader to preserve the party as a well-sharpened sword for the Führer. End of quotation. The domination of the German government by the top members of the leadership corps was facilitated by a circular decree of the Reich Minister of Justice, dated 17 February 1934, which established equal rank for the offices within the Reichsleitung of the leadership corps and the Reich offices of the German government. In this decree, it was expressly provided that, quote, the supreme offices of the Reich Party Directorate are equal in rank to the supreme Reich government authorities, unquote. The party manual termed the control exercised over the machinery of the government by the leadership corps, quote, the permeation of the state apparatus with the political will of the party, unquote. At a later stage in this proceeding, it will be shown that the leadership corps of the Nazi Party incontestably dominated the German state and government. The control of the leadership corps of the German government was facilitated by uniting in the same Nazi chieftains both high office within the Reichsleitung and the corresponding offices within the apparatus of the government. For example, this chart, document 2903. Goebbels was Reichslighter in charge of party propaganda, but he was also a cabinet minister in charge of propaganda and public enlightenment. Himmler held office within the Reichsleitung as head of the main office for Volksdom. You'll notice the box right below his name. And also was Reichsführer of the SS. At the same time, Himmler held the governmental position of the Reich Commission for the consolidation of Germandom and was the governmental head of the German police system. As will be shown, this personal union of high office in the leadership corps and high governmental position in the same Nazi leaders greatly accommodated the plan of the leadership corps to dominate and control the German state and government. In addition to the Reichsleiter, the party directorate included about 11 Hauptamter, or main offices, and about 4 Amter, or offices. As set forth in the above exhibit, the Hauptamter of the party included such main organizations as those for personnel, training, technology, which was headed by the defendant Speer, Volksdom, headed by Himmler, civil servants, communal policy, and the like. The Amter, or offices of the party within the Reichsleitung, included the office for foreign policy under the defendant Rosenberg, which the evidence will show actively participated in the plans for the launching of the war of aggression against Norway, the office for colonial policy, the office for genealogy, and the office of racial policy. As will be shown by the chart of the leadership corps in the small one which your honors have, certain of the main offices and offices within the Reichsleitung would appear again within the Gauleitung, or Gau Party Directorate, and the Kreisleitung, which is at the bottom, or Party County Directorate. It is thus shown that the Reichslighter and the main office and office holders within the Reichsleitung exercise through functional channels, that's in this little one with the dotted lines running down, functional channels through the subordinate offices on lower regional levels, a total control over the various sectors of the national life of Germany. I shall next take up the Gauleiter. As will be seen from this chart, the party divided Germany into major administrative regions. Gau, which in turn was subdivided into Kreis, and then the Ortsgruppen, local chapters, Zellen, cells, and Block are the Blockleiters. Each Gau was in charge of a Gauleiter who was the political leader of the Gau or the district. Each Gau was appointed by and was responsible to Hitler himself. I quote from page 18 of this same document, 1893 PS. Page 18. Quote, the Gau represents the concentration of a number of party counties or Kreis. The Gauleiter is directly subordinate to the Führer. Your Honors find it, it's page 18 of the English translation, document 1893. The Gauleiters bear overall responsibility to the Führer for the sector of sovereignty entrusted to him. The rights, duties, and jurisdiction of the Gauleiter result primarily from the mission assigned by the Führer, and apart from that, from detailed directives. End of quotation. The responsibility and function of the Gauleiter and his staff officers or office holders were essentially a political one, namely, to ensure the authority of the Nazi Party within his area, to coordinate the activities of the party and all its affiliated and supervised organizations, and to enlarge the influence of the party over the people and life in his Gau generally. Following the outbreak of the war, when it became imperative to coordinate the various phases of the German war effort, the Gauleiter were given additional important responsibilities. The Ministerial Council for the Defense of the Reich, which was a sort of general staff for civilian defense and the mobilization of the German war economy, by decree of 1 September 1939, Reichsgesetzblatt, Part 1, page 1565, appointed about 16 Gauleiter as Reich Defense Commissars, concerning which I asked the tribunal to take judicial notice. Later, under the impact of mounting military reverses and an increasingly strained war economy, more and more important administrative functions were put on the Gau basis. The party Gau became the basic defense area of the Reich, and each Gauleiter became a Reich Defense Commissar. Decree of the Ministerial Council for the Defense of the Reich of 16 November 1942, Gesetzblatt, Reichsgesetzblatt, Part O, page 649, of which I asked the tribunal to take judicial notice. In the course of the war, additional functions were entrusted to the Gauleiter so that at the end, with the exception of certain special matters, such as police affairs, almost all phases of the German war economy were coordinated and supervised by them. For instance, regional authority over price control was put under the Gauleiter as Reich Defense Commissar, and housing administration was placed under the Gauleiter as Gau Housing Commissar. Toward the end of the war, the Gauleiter were charged even with military and quasi-military tasks. They were made commanders of the Volkssturm in their areas and were entrusted with such important functions as the evacuation of civilian population in the path of the advancing Allied armies, as well as measures for the destruction of vital installations. The structure and organization of the Party Gau were substantially repeated in the lower levels of the Reich Party organization, such as the Kreis, the Ortsgruppen, cells, and blocks. Each of these was headed by a political leader who, subject to the Führer principle and the orders of superior political leaders, was a sovereign within his sphere. The leadership corps of the Nazi Party was in effect a hierarchy of descending Caesars. Each of the subordinate party levels, such as the Kreis, Ortsgruppen, and so on, was organized into offices or Amter dealing with the various specialized functions of the party. But the number of such departments and offices diminished as the party unit dropped in the hierarchy, so that while the Kreis office contained all or most all of the offices in the Gau, such as deputy, staff office leader, organization leader, school leader, propaganda leader, press office leader, treasurer, judge of the party court, inspector, and the like, the Ortsgruppe had less than the Zellen, and the Block still fewer. The Reichslighter, or the county leader. The Reichslighter was appointed and dismissed by Hitler upon the nomination of the Gauleiter and directly subordinate to the Gauleiter in the party hierarchy. The Kreis usually consisted of a single county. The Reichslighter within the Kreis had in general the same position, powers, and prerogatives granted to the Gauleiter in the Gau. In cities, they constituted the very core of party power and organization. I quote again from page 17 of document 1893. Page 17 of the English translation. Quote, "The Reichsleiter carries overall responsibility towards the Gauleiter within his zone of sovereignty for the political and ideological training and organization of the political leaders, the party members, as well as the population." Unquote. The Ortsgruppenleiter, who was the local chapter leader. The area of the Ortsgruppenleiter comprised one or more communes, or in a town, a certain district. The Ortsgruppe was composed of a combination of blocks and cells according to local circumstances and contained up to 1,500 households. He also had a staff of office leaders to assist him in the various functional activities of the party. All other political leaders in his area of responsibility were subordinate to and under the direction of the Ortsgruppenleiter. For example, the leaders of the various affiliated organizations of the party within his area, such as the German Labor Front, the Nazi organizations for lawyers, students, and civil servants, were all subordinate to the Ortsgruppenleiter. In accordance with the Führer principle, the Ortsgruppenleiter, or local chapter leaders, were appointed by the Gauleiter and were directly under and subordinate to the Reichsleiter. The party manual provides, with reference to the Ortsgruppenleiter, and I quote pages 16 to 17 of document 1893, and I quote, "As Hoheitsträger, bearer of sovereignty." It's from pages 16 to 17, if you honor, please.
Thank you. Yes.
"All expressions of the party will emanate from the Ortsgruppenleiter. He is responsible for the political and ideological leadership and organization within his zone of sovereignty. The Ortsgruppenleiter carries the overall responsibility for the political results of all measures initiated by the offices, organizations, and affiliated associations of the party. The Ortsgruppenleiter has the right to protect the Reichsleiter against any measures contrary to the interests of the party with regard to an outside political appearance in public." End of the quotation. The Zellenleiter. was responsible for 4 to 8 blocks, next to the bottom there. He was the immediate superior of and had control and supervision over the block lighter. His mission and duties, according to the party manual, corresponded to the missions of the block lighter. I quote from the last paragraph of page 15, it's just one line of that same document. Quote, the missions of the cell leader correspond to the missions of the block leader, unquote. The block leader was the one party official who was peculiarly in a position to have continuous contact with the German people. The block was the lowest unit in the party pyramidal organization. The block of the party comprised 40 to 60 households and was regarded by the party as the focal point upon which to press the weight of its propaganda. I quote from pages 13 and 14 of this same document. Quote, the household is the basic community upon which the block and cell system is built. The household is the organizational focal point of all Germans, united in an apartment, and includes roomers, domestic help, etc. The block lighter has jurisdiction over all matters within his zone relating to the movement and is fully responsible to the Zellenleiter, unquote. The block lighter, as in the case of other political leaders, was charged with planning, disseminating, and developing a receptivity to the policies of the Nazi Party among the population in his area of responsibility. It was also the express duty of the block lighter to spy on the population. I quote from pages 14 and 15 of this same document. Quote, it is the duty of the block lighter to find people disseminating damaging rumors and to report them to the Ortsgruppe so that they may be reported to the respective state authorities. The block lighter must not only be a preacher and defender of the National Socialist ideology towards the members of the nation and the party entrusted to his political care, but he must also strive to achieve practical collaboration of the party members within his block zone. The block lighter shall continuously remind the party members of their particular duties toward the people and the state. The block lighter keeps a list, a card file about the households. In principle, the block lighter will settle his official business verbally, and he will receive messages verbally and pass them in the same way. Correspondence will only be used in cases of absolute necessity. The block lighter conducts National Socialist propaganda from mouth to mouth. He will eventually awaken the understanding of the eternally dissatisfied as regards the frequently misunderstood or wrongly interpreted measures and laws of the National Socialist government. It is not necessary to him to fall in with complaints and gripes about possibly obvious shortcomings of any kind in order to demonstrate solidarity. A condition to gain the confidence of all people is to maintain absolute secrecy in all matters. End of the quotation. It will be shown that there were in Germany nearly 500,000 block lighters. Large though this figure may appear, there can be no doubt that these officials were in and of the leadership corps of the Nazi Party, though they stood at the broad base of the party pyramid rather than at its summit where rested the Reichslighter. By virtue of this fact, they were stationed at close intervals throughout the German civil population.
I think, Colonel Storey, it would be of assistance to the tribunal, if you could tell us at some time, convenient to yourself, approximately how many there were of each of these ranks of the
If Your
court.
Honor, please, that's the next subject.
Very well.
It may be doubted that the average German ever looked upon the face of Heinrich Himmler. But the man in the street in Nazi Germany could not have avoided an uneasy acquaintance with the Blockleiter in his own neighborhood, as it is the cop on the beat, rather than the chief magistrate of the nation who symbolize law enforcement to the average man and woman. So it was the block leaders who represented to the people of Germany the police state of Hitler's Germany. In fact, as may be inferred from the evidence, the Blockleiter were little Führers with real and literal power over the civilians in their domains. As proof of the authority of the Blockleiter to exercise coercion and threat of force upon the civilian population, I quote from document 2833 PS, which is an excerpt from page 7 of the magazine entitled The Face of the Party, 2833 PS. It's just a line quotation. Advice and sometimes also the harsher form of education is employed if the faulty conduct of an individual harms this individual himself and thus also the community, unquote. Now, before I get to the numbers, I wanted to deal with the Hoheitssteiger. Does Your Honor want to go?
Time to break off?
Yes, sir.
Till 2 o'clock?